Hi everyone, Amy here checking in for week 4 of our semester. I thought I would go ahead and post this now because we have a lot coming up this weekend. It's kind of a big deal because we have the deadline for our first major essay. So that's what I'm going to start with here today. I just want to show you the Dropbox for that to make sure you know where it goes. So when you click on the Dropbox tab at the top of our D2L page, or if you just follow the link that's in the news item or in the content materials for this week, it will look like this. You can see it's the very first folder actually because we start with our formal essays, and of course this is the first one. So if you wanted to look at the assignment sheet there, you could to double check, make sure that you have looked at the rubric, kind of scored yourself according to the descriptions there and have a good sense of what to expect. And then you can click on the folder itself and go to where it says submit files and upload it as an attachment just like you have been all semester long. If you have any comments, questions or anything you want me to know, you can just type those into the box there and then click submit. Now it's very important. You will receive a submission receipt, over here, email. There should be a little red dot show up by your mailbox if there's not one already. And that's how you know that you have successfully turned it in. If you do not get that email, it means there was a problem and you need to try to resubmit it or email me or something. Make sure that you get that email. That's really the only way you'll know that you for sure turned it in. And the other thing is you can submit multiple times up until the deadline when the Dropbox closes, and I will always grade your most recent submission. So if you go in and realize, oh no, I forgot to format it according to MLA style, or I attached the wrong document or something like that, I don't believe it will let you delete your own files, but you can always upload more and I'll grade the one that is the most recent version. So I'll just ignore or delete the older versions that you turned in first. And I will also won't begin grading them until after the deadline on Friday. So if you realize, maybe you got my feedback on your journal and you realize you need to change something, you can go ahead and change that and still submit it for your grade up until the deadline tomorrow night at midnight. And I won't grade the first version that you uploaded. And then also remember, if you missed any part of the workshop, either uploading your rough draft or commenting on your partner's draft, you will lose points off the top of your grade. So that's just something to be prepared for. If you know that you didn't do all of the required peer review workshop, you can lose 5% or 10% if you skipped both parts of that. Okay, so I think that's about it. If you have any problems submitting or have any questions about submitting, please don't hesitate to email me. I'll be checking email. I know this is our first big major essay deadline, so it's really important to me that this goes smoothly, and I want to help you with that. But also be aware that Dropbox does close Friday night at midnight. I know lots of things are due Sunday night at midnight, but for major essays, they will always be due on Fridays. So just be aware. Don't forget, it's due tomorrow. Don't get that confused. Okay, so now I just want to move on to one more thing from last week, week 3, which was your quiz. It was over independent and dependent clauses, and actually, for the most part, everyone did really well on this quiz. Let's see, get my hyperlink going. Okay, the score, I think, average was a 90%, so that means that you all kind of averaged an A on the quiz, so that's great. Let me see, it's not following my link here. I'll just go this way and have it show me. Actually, I have to go out of my student view. Sorry, guys. Give me just a second here. Okay, so I'm going to look at the statistics, and what I'll show you is what I was just talking about, which you can see is that the average was a 90.83, so it's actually 91. And then there was only one question that less than 83% of you got right. So we're scoring kind of an average of an A or a B on every single one of these questions, except for question 3, which was kind of interesting. It was just a true-false question, giving you an example and asking, is this an independent or a dependent clause? Or actually it was saying the following is independent, true or false. So after its first production, in which the lead of Peter Pan was played by a woman, period. This is actually not an independent clause, it's a dependent clause, so the answer would be false. The reason why this is not an independent clause is because it starts with a preposition in both sections of the sentence. So I'm calling this a section of the sentence just because there's a punctuation mark here, so we know that these are going to be two separate clauses. Clauses aren't always separated by punctuation, but if you do see a punctuation mark, it usually means that what is on either side is going to be two separate clauses. So in this case, both of those sections of the sentence begin with a preposition, after and in. And because of that, they are definitely going to be dependent no matter what, because prepositional phrases cannot be independent clauses. They are always dependent. So that's just kind of one of those rules that you have to memorize. If you see any of those directional or spatial terms, through, over, under, before, after, with, for, by, outside, anything about where something is or where in time something is or how things are located, that's going to be a preposition. And clauses that begin with prepositions are prepositional phrases, and they're always dependent. And actually, if you were even to take out this preposition right here, we would still have two dependent clauses. Typically, I would say, you could work around this by anchoring the first prepositional phrase to a independent clause, and that would make the whole thing a complete sentence. But even if you took out this preposition, we would not have an independent clause here because which is actually a subordinate conjunction. So it's a word that joins two clauses together, but because it is a subordinate conjunction, it makes one of those subordinate to the other, and therefore it makes it a dependent clause. It's similar to a word like because. That's why we always hear don't start a sentence with the word because demonstrates something being subordinate, and therefore it's dependent. So really there's not a lot you can do to this sentence to make it a complete sentence except take out both of the terms here, the preposition and the subordinating conjunction, and then the sentence would just be, after its first production, the lead of Peter Pan was played by a woman. And that way we would have the lead of Peter Pan as the subject of the sentence and was as the action or the verb of the sentence. This would be an independent clause, and it would anchor the prepositional phrase at the beginning, and the whole thing would be correct. So that is probably more grammar than you ever wanted to know. So I'm just going to leave it at that. In general, you can look at these stats and see that you are all doing very well. And if any of this means a lot to you and you want to know more information, just send me an email or something. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about our next essay. So we're starting Unit 2 of the semester this week. We are moving into what's called a summary and response essay, and this type of essay is cool because we actually get to deal with another writer's work. We get to look at something that was written by somebody else and learn about it, and then actually give our own opinion on it. So I want to show you the assignment sheet for this one really quickly. You can see it's laid out just the same as the narrative essay assignment sheet was. I'm giving you an option of articles. So when you see 3 articles here, don't think that you have to write about all 3. We will do activities with all 3 throughout the course of the next several weeks, but you're only required to choose one to focus on in your essay. So that's kind of the first thing here. You are going to do 2 things in this essay. It's kind of like a twofold purpose. You'll be summarizing to show that you understood the article and that you can pick out the main ideas of it and not focus on the specific details and be objective and not give your opinion. Then you're going to be responding to it by kind of switching gears and turning on that opinion factory and coming up with lots of ideas that will show where you do agree or disagree with that article. And then you'll be pulling in examples from your own life to show why you agree and disagree. So we'll kind of be building on some of those same personal examples that you were bringing into the narrative essay in Unit 1. You are writing this for me, so you're really trying to show me that you understood the article and that you read it. So you're going to have to read the article multiple times, and again, we'll be doing lots of activities. And then I want to learn about you too, because I want to hear your thoughts and your critical thinking as you're agreeing and disagreeing with the article. And then as a writer, I want you to just be really thoughtful. And the main thing I'm looking for here is that you can distinguish between the objective and the subjective. I need to see that you can turn off your opinion factory when it's time and just show that you understood something and you can do it justice, so to speak. And then I want to see that you can also do the other thing, which is to be critical, react, ask questions, hold text to a high standard, because that's something we're going to build on in Unit 3, and then it'll become even more important when you get to English 121 in a future semester. So You'll be choosing one of these articles. We'll read them over the next 3 weeks and you'll do activities with them, as I said before. You'll want to practice what we're calling both close and critical reading, so we'll talk about that over the next several weeks. But when you're reading closely, you're reading for understanding and just to really make sure that you have made sense of something, because it's not fair to criticize something until you fully understand it. And then you will start reading critically to deepen the inquiry, engage with the text, agree and disagree, again, ask questions, be critical, those kinds of things. And then you're going to say, overall, do I agree or disagree with this writer? And then you're going to include that in a thesis statement along with reasons why you agree and disagree. That will go as kind of the structural basis for the response portion of your essay. So you can see here there is a breakdown of an outline of how you can plan your paper to develop both portions of the essay. You'll need an intro that just kind of introduces the topic. You'll need to summarize the article right after that. There are some tips here, and it should only be a couple of paragraphs long. For the response portion of your essay, you will have an actual thesis statement that does what I set up here, says whether you overall agree or disagree and why. And then based on those points, you're going to develop body paragraphs for the bulk of the response portion of your essay. The response should be about 2/3 of your essay, whereas the summary at the beginning should only be about 1/3. And you'll be using topic sentences stating where you agree and disagree. And then you'll bring in personal examples to develop those paragraphs, as I mentioned before. And then in your conclusion, you will restate your thesis and reflect. So once you have that outline, you want to solidify your entire thesis statement, and that is going to actually go in its own short little transitional paragraph right after the summary portion of your essay and before those response body paragraphs that I mentioned before. And you'll develop your paragraphs based on that. So we have kind of a forwards and backwards process here. You'll start with your outline and then use that to develop your thesis, and then work backwards from your thesis to actually write those paragraphs. And then, like we did on the last essay, you'll be practicing both local and global revision. It'll need to be formatted according to MLA style, and for this one, because we're bringing in another writer's work, you're going to have to use MLA citations both in text and in a works cited page at the end. So we'll practice with that over the next couple of weeks as well. It needs to be a minimum of 3 full pages plus your works cited, might be even a little longer than that. Your rough draft is due July 12th, and your final draft is due July 21st. And because this is a much bigger assignment and we're spending 4 weeks on it, you'll see it's worth 200 points. Then these strategies kind of work chronologically through the steps that you saw up here and tell you what to do at each stage in the process. So in your summary, you're going to leave out your opinion. It should be about 1/3 of the essay. Just focus on the thesis and main points and none of the specific details. How to introduce the article. Kind of talks a little bit more about the specific examples and where to not include those. Then you're going to have a response thesis of your own that states your points of agreement and disagreement, where you will develop those in body paragraphs for about 2/3 of the essay. And then you can bring in examples from your own life, but you can bring in pop culture examples or examples from people you know as well. It doesn't have to just be you. We're going to be using strategies of quoting and paraphrasing as we bring in examples from the article that you're discussing. And then it's got to, of course, be edited so that I can understand what you're trying to say and do your ideas justice. And then you can see here what you'll be graded on. Your summary and response are, of course, the 2 most important things. How well you can bring in those examples from the article using quote and paraphrase successfully and ethically. How well organized the entire essay is with 2 separate sections for summary and response, and a thesis for your response, and intro and conclusion, and that kind of thing. And then your editing, your MLA, all of those kind of local revision types of elements here. And I should say, if I haven't said this before, I do organize my assignment sheets so that the most important and heavily weighted parts of your grade are over here on the left, and these things over to the right are important, but not quite as big of a deal in terms of the grand scheme of your overall grade. All right, so if you have any further questions about that assignment, please let me know. I'm sure that they'll come up over the next several weeks, but that was just meant to give you a gist of what we're moving into for Unit 2. All right, so I also want to talk now about your discussion for this week, which does deal with a sample of the essay that we're working on now, as well as the first article that you have to choose from by Carol Dweck about the fixed and the growth mindset. So I can see there's already some really good ideas here for summary and response, so I'm excited to see where these are going to go over the next few weeks. So I do want to say too, like in general, this is really good work. Everyone did a really good job with this overall, doing both parts 1 and part 2. I can see you put a lot of effort and thoughtfulness into your posts, and so I just appreciate that hard work. It's been one of our better discussions so far this semester, I think. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is how the sample essay is organized, and I'm just going to go to Leslie's post because it's pretty much perfect. It's like a straight up breakdown of how the sample essay is organized from start to finish, right on the money the whole way through. So there's kind of a topic sentence here at the beginning, and then a list of everything the essay does that is appropriate for summary and response. So the intro provides background information and ends with the thesis, doesn't include any personal opinion. Then the author presents the summary of the article. The author introduces the article and the title at the beginning of the summary, and then presents the intention or the purpose of the writing to inform. I'm just going to tell you right now, all the articles that you have to choose from are persuasive in their purpose, FYI. And then in this paragraph, the author does not give extraneous details of the article, only presents the main ideas, basically, I think here, and that is right on the money as well. Next, in the third paragraph, the author provides a thesis of his own that includes his reaction to the article, partly agrees and partly disagrees. The author develops his reactions by explaining each point in separate body paragraphs, so that is very important here. The author also gives examples to support each point and concludes by restating the response thesis. I will emulate such strategies, and then I really liked how in part 2 Leslie kind of continues on that. She says, in my summary and response essay, I might focus on the article in the following steps. First, I will create a personal introduction that does not give away my thesis. The purpose is to attract readers' interest. Next, I will make a summary of the article. Third, I will show an example to prove my opinion that a simple belief can indeed affect the way we live our life. I'm talking about Dweck's article there. Fourth, I will give examples to prove my idea and conclude by restating the response thesis and providing some reflection. So yeah, like a really perfect breakdown of how the whole thing should be organized, and then I love how Leslie is being really thoughtful here about how that is going to apply to her own writing and how she's going to be able to emulate specifically those kind of structural strategies in her own writing. And also that distinction between the objective and the subjective is really important. So that was something that came up in several people's posts, but Megan talked about it a little bit here. So in your summary, you want to leave your opinion out altogether, but your response is really all about your opinion. So I know it seems weird that you're doing both, but you do want to separate them at this point in your learning about reading and writing, because it's definitely a 1-2 step process. You really have to understand something objectively before, again, you earn the right to criticize it critically. So I'm making you do those things separately right now, but as you become more and more skilled and practiced with this, you'll start to do them simultaneously. But hopefully by the time you get to English 121, you're more familiar to where you can kind of weave back and forth between those two things at the same time. So Megan talked about that here. She says, the intro paragraph gives some background on the topic and a summary of the thesis without any personal opinion. In the second paragraph is where there's a complete summary of the Rosen article. In the third paragraph is where the author presents his own opinion on the subject. It's good reading. I like the structure of the essay. I use these techniques in my writing. Make sure my thesis is clear and not give my own opinion too soon. So that is really important. I don't want to see, again, any of your opinion in the summary whatsoever, or really even in the intro paragraph. You can introduce the topic without giving away your agree and disagree points. So you're just kind of setting things up and hooking the reader's attention there in the intro, and then going straight into your summary, which is all from the article, none of your own thoughts. And as such, you're going to need a lot of citations in that section. But then from there, Again, that's just a third of the essay. So most of the essay after that is going to be your response where you do get to give your opinion. So that's going to take the form of different points of agreement and disagreement, and I just want to kind of share a couple of my thoughts about that because over the next couple weeks I'm going to be asking you to start to brainstorm places where you agree and disagree with the article. So one thing I noticed was that in Jackie's post in her part 2, she's saying a lot of things, and I think they're meant to be points of agreement with the article, but in fact this is really just summary still. So Jackie says the article tells you about the different mindsets there are and how each one has its pros and cons. It definitely does cite the article there, so that's nice. The mindset that you put yourself in can change your life. Before you put yourself in one mindset, try to think of other ways that you can think about your decisions. If you look at things from a different point of view, you will make the right decision. Do not fall into peer pressure and think of the best thing to do and do the right thing. So there again is a little citation here, so I can tell this first sentence is really meant to be summary, but after that it's kind of hard to tell. Jackie, do you mean these to be your own ideas that you're saying, your own thoughts, or do you think that this, or are you meaning this to be summary of the article? So it's not clear, number one, because there's not enough citations, but also because I think what you're really doing here is maybe agreeing with the article, but not really saying anything different. And so I brought this up because it's just a super common thing that people do when they start to agree with someone and they end up just repeating that person's ideas. But in this type of essay, you have to give those ideas credit or you're not citing correctly. If you're really just repeating what the author has said, give them credit for it. Give it a citation. If you're doing a point of response where you're saying where you agree or disagree, make sure that you say something different than just what the original writer has said. So it's okay to agree with the writer, but you've got to make it personal enough that you're saying your own thing and not just paraphrasing what they have said in your own words, because even paraphrase needs to be cited and credited to that writer because it's an idea that you didn't come up with on your own. So again, Jackie, I'm just bringing this up because it's super common. People do this all the time. It's natural actually as humans, but I just want to show you that this would actually need to be cited, and then if you want to make an agree point about where you do fall into this same line of thinking, go beyond just what the writer has said and bring in some of your own ideas. This came up in Jonathan's thread. He's saying some kind of funny things here about being the devil's advocate, but he actually brings up some pretty substantial points of disagreement. So he says, I have lots of personal experience with this. There's validity on both sides. I tested above average as a kid, but never felt like I had to live up to that standard academically if I chose not to. My parents were not the type to force me into studying. I'll explain more of that in my essay. And then I think this point here is a really good one. Feeling like one must choose between the two mindsets might leave a third or fourth option off the table, so I'll explore that as well. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that, and I see it in students' papers all the time. When Dweck is saying, well, it's either this or this, fixed or growth, there's probably some gray area. There's probably a third or a fourth or a fifth or a 17th other option that she's maybe oversimplifying and saying you have to choose between these two things, when really that's not logically the case. So try to think about places, where can you push back against the article a little bit, or at the very least, if you are totally agreeing with the writer, bring in a personal example or something different from your own life. But what I want to point out about that is something that came up in Kendall's part 2 here, which is that I want to emphasize you don't have to be the polar opposite of somebody to disagree with them. I think that's what we are told in our society, right? It's either black or white, it's Democrat or Republican, it's whatever versus whatever, and there's only two options. But really, you can be slightly of a different perspective and disagree, but still have some common ground. That will also become very important when you get to English 121. But Kendall is saying here, my overall reaction was in complete agreement from start to finish. What caught my attention was the first personality, because my sister and I can always share a laugh when we refer to the good old Russia luck. In other words, my parents' mindset can resemble the first spoken of in the article. Therefore, I most definitely find the author's viewpoints valid and worth considering. sharing. So this is a personal example. That's good. Kendall's saying, yeah, this is just like when my parents refer to the old Russia luck and kind of write off bad luck as just something that happens to our family. That's definitely a fixed mindset. So that's what she's saying here. It's not paraphrased, so it doesn't need to be cited. It's her own ideas. It's coming from her own brain, so to speak. But this part here about being in complete agreement from start to finish, I find that hard to believe, Kendall. I bet there's something you could find in the article that you do have a slightly different perspective on. So I just want to push back on all of you and encourage you to think about those things where you just might be kind of slightly different or somewhat of a different way of thinking, I guess you could say. It doesn't have to be polar opposite or totally on the other side. You can definitely agree about some things, but maybe there's something that you just have like a different take on, so to speak. So that's the direction I want to push all of you in and encouraging you to come up with some of those ideas for the response portion of your essay. And then I'll just say, because your comments are due tomorrow night at midnight, only one of you has done those so far. It's Leslie. And if you're looking for examples of what to include in your comments, Leslie's done a really good job with her comments this week, and that's definitely what I'm looking for. So if some of you are like, well, I haven't scored as high on my last couple of discussions, I don't know what Amy's looking for, this is something that's going to get you a really high score. So it's an entire paragraph. It's her own independent ideas. It's not just repeating what the original person said. It's not just saying, good job, I agree, yes, yes, yes. It's constructive. It's really engaging in a conversation and extending the discussion, which makes sense because this is a discussion assignment. All right, so that brings me to my last point here, which is just what you'll be doing over the weekend. Of course, you have your comments that I was just mentioning due Friday night at midnight on 2 classmates, because this is just a regular weekly discussion. You can comment on anyone, but you do need to do 2. And then for Sunday night, the reflections on your own original thread, what people commented to you on. I have commented personally to all of you and what you learned this week. You also should have already done your journal, which is about active reading. But if you haven't done that already, make sure that you do that and turn it in by midnight on Sunday. Of course, I'm skipping the 2 most important things here, which are to turn in your narrative essay, do midnight on Friday, Friday, and to, of course, read the materials for Unit 2's major writing assignment, which is the summary and response essay. Then our grammar work is focused on fragments and run-on sentences, so that is building a little bit on what we did last week with the independent and dependent clauses. And then for your student success, I'm going to have you do a particular type of note-taking strategy called annotating, which is something that you do right on a text. It's a way to take notes while you're reading, and it's something you can use in all your classes. So Deb's going to be helping you with that and giving you some note-taking strategies. But if you have any questions about this week's assignment, let me know. Like I said, you're all doing really good this week, so keep up the good work, and I look forward to seeing what you do over the weekend. Thanks.